Morning, everyone. My name is Chip Mason. I'm in the mainframe security area at CA. This is going to be a bit of a different presentation than normal. I'm not going to talk to you about a product that we're shipping or try to sell you anything. I instead want you to sell me something. So in this case, I want your feedback on some concepts that we're working on around the notion of using machine learning to help understand insider threats in the mainframe. There are a number of solutions like this on the market for distributed systems, particularly associated with privileged access management tools. As you know, we've had privileged access management tools in the mainframe since the beginning of time, and therefore the observation is that that data already exists. And so what I want to do is get your feedback. I'm going to actually take you through some use cases, some scenarios, and I'd like to hear from you if you think these things are good, or maybe there's a slightly different twist or direction you'd like to take it in. So if you'll humor me on that, I'd really appreciate it. Of course, this is all forward-looking information. As I said, this isn't a product that exists, but it could be a product that exists. And I want to get your opinion on that. So, of course, we're all familiar with the latest news on breaches and data that's stolen credentials, hacked into mainframes. Insider threat. So I know some of you may have been in our previous presentations, but insider threat is becoming a very big problem. We've all heard of disgruntled employees, of those that have left. You've heard about the guy that got rid of the president's Twitter account on his way out the door, right? So those we've heard of, but there's also a new trend of current employees stealing, and trying to sell data on the dark web. So Gartner calls these people second streamers. That means they're seeking a second stream of income. So they remain employed, they keep collecting their salary, and they're looking for additional money, and they go and post data on the dark web trying to sell it. So this is a well-understood and well-known problem. So if you're wanting to find insider threat, it's very difficult. And the main reason is that because insiders, they're doing their job, right? They have permission to access the data that they probably download and take home on a thumb drive or download to some server somewhere that we can't really detect because it's their normal job. They're doing that, right? So it makes it really hard to understand sort of what activity they're doing is not normal and what activity is normal. Now, one of the benefits of our mainframe systems is that no matter which ESM you're using, RACF, ACF2, or top secret, you're collecting data on the user activity, right? So it's something that happens. You can turn the logging on, turn it off, but by and large, all that data already exists about pretty much every activity a user does. If you're doing something like our tools, our compliance event manager is monitoring rack route data and pulls all that down, and you can see every activity these users do. So we know that the data exists, and the capability to collect that data already exists. The issue is figuring out among all that data which is sort of the unusual behavior. And that's what we're looking at. So there's an area in the market called User and Entity Behavior Analytics. Has anyone heard of this? UEBA? I'll use the UEBA term a lot, but this essentially is using machine learning to differentiate between what's normal behavior and what's abnormal behavior, and sending you alerts whenever you see that. So we're looking at considering creating a mainframe-only solution for this space. Now, if you've been over to, and I encourage you, if you haven't been over to the security booth over there, which contains most of our distributed security solutions, they have a product called Threat Analytics for PAM. And that is a UEBA solution that does insider threat analysis using the CA PAM data that they collect within the CA PAM tool. So if you're using CA PAM, it's taking that data and doing threat analytics and looking at normal and abnormal. So that's an area that we have expertise in at CA, and now we're looking to see whether we should actually apply that expertise and create a mainframe version, if you will, of that solution. So the idea here is that we create baselines for a mainframe activity. Now mainframe activity, by the way, it's called user and entity. User's understood, but entity's kind of weird, right? Entity means things other than users, applications, APIs, etc. So you may have an application that has API access to data on your mainframe. It's not too difficult for a hacker to actually extract the API keys if they're poorly coded within an application, and we never see that, right? If somebody codes the API keys within an application, then someone who has expertise can grab those keys and suck down the mainframe data. As far as you know, it's just the mobile application. So it can be done, and that's why we're going to include entity into this, because it's not just the humans. You're laughing over there because I think you know how to do it. Machine learning capability will actually be used here to understand what is normal, okay? So an example here, and we'll go through this, is, you know, what if you go into your office in the morning and you log in and you start doing some work, and then all of a sudden you log in Shanghai. Now let's assume you don't work in Shanghai, you work in New York, and then you log in Shanghai and download a file. Well, that's normal behavior, right? I mean, you're accessing a file that you have permissions to access. But what's unusual is that you're logged into New York and in Shanghai at the same time. That's something you would probably want to be alerted to understand. So we're going to leverage all that information that comes out of the activity monitoring within the ESM. So what we're really going to try to do is find these bad actors using this detection. So if someone were to log in 2 places at once, that would be a bad action, and we could trigger an alert almost immediately, say, look, this is something I've never seen before. So what we want to do is really streamline alert and incident investigations, right? So today, if you're trying to do insider threat, what do? Well, eventually, you find the guy that's doing this, somebody alerts you to somebody selling something or whatnot, and you go, and what do? You download a bunch of ESM logs, right? And you go through them manually. You kind of page through these things. Or maybe if you're lucky, you have a product like CEM and you can filter on the user and bring up all that information. But you got to page through it and see if anything looks unusual to you, right? In this case, we're going to save you the time of doing that. We're going to alert you when there are things that are unusual. So, of course, Mainframe has information. It's pretty granular data, especially if you want to log it. So you can look at every logon, every access to every application. You can see behavior and activity within application. You can see FTP sessions, all that. So it's really good information and data there. Okay? All right, so now, the question part. What do you think of this concept? Does this sound like, wow, that's great, or yeah, well, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. Anything else? Mike, you're not afraid to talk, so tell me.
Oh no, the concept's great. I'm trying to figure out how to sell it.
How to sell it?
Yeah.
Well, that's my job.
Yeah, because what they're doing, what my clients are doing now is looking at, you know, I'm an ACF2 environment in the mainframe, and they're looking at millions of lines of RV reports that they can't even, you know, they have the record of it.
Yes.
They don't have any way to process it. There's
so
too much information.
The problem is there's too much information, right?
Now, so the ability to get through it and to identify the areas where you need to pay attention. I mean, basically, they look at those reports and they judge them by weight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. By weight. Yeah. That's right.
Increase the size a lot, then there's something I got to look at.
And you know, this is the promise of machine learning here. So Mike was, if you didn't hear him, he was talking about current customers are basically using. If the report is really big, it's probably important because there's just so much data. The idea here is to use machine learning. And the idea is to feed it a bunch of data, weeks, months worth of data, so this data you're talking about. And within that, it can understand what looks normal. Now, so let's say you might want to spend it 3 months worth of data. You can see what they do on Monday mornings. You can see what they do an average week. Maybe in the close of the quarter, there's some additional activity that is normal as well that we don't want to throw alerts on. So we'll be feeding that data to make sure it does that. The idea is to find the needle in the haystack here, is when they're doing something that's unusual. There's an odd log on. Maybe they've logged in for the last 3 months, they've logged into New York every day. And then the next month they log in California. Well, the tool is going to throw an alert and say, hey, you got an unusual login. Now, what's probably happened is he's traveled to New York and there was a travel freeze for the previous quarter, so he can go anywhere. Now he's properly in California in a branch office, okay? So then you can inform the system, nope, that's okay, you know, that's okay. Check out the IP address, everything is good. So, you know, these things can do miracles, but they can also have issues, right? So, but you train it and say, no, nope, that's a legitimate IP address, everything's good. And then from then on, it'll learn that this person may go to California occasionally, and that's good stuff. Now, if they log into Shanghai, you throw the alert, and that one, oh, that was a good one. Yeah, we didn't know about that one. So, anybody else? Any other feedback?
That's a good idea. I know we're really clamping down on stuff, but we're doing
the
proactive approach to stopping it getting there first.
Okay.
That's a lot of things are starting to happen.
Right.
where I were getting it.
Okay. So it's a good idea. You have it covered now, or you don't think it's that important an issue?
Oh no, I think it's very important. I don't deal with that issue.
Okay.
That side is not my
Okay.
job.
Right, I understand.
But no, I think it's a great issue.
Okay. So he's saying it's not part of his job at the moment. So whose job do you think this would be in your company? Is that somebody in the CISO's team on the distributed side primarily, or?
Security.
So security,
Yeah,
yeah,
all
that's
kinds of
security.
security groups.
Okay, that's good, that's good. All right. A lot of tools, so in this space, everybody's heard of SIM tools, so Splunks, ArcSights, these kind of tools, which have gone from being just log analyzers, now they're looking at security information. So a number of these are taking a lot of that information and adding machine learning to do this same kind of thing on an enterprise basis. So one of our concepts here is to actually filter the events within the mainframe and then send those events that look suspicious also to the SIM tool so that you can inform the entire organization. But as a mainframe security team, you get the alerts first, then you decide what to do, but those also go to the SIM tool where analysis can be done as well. Yes, Mike?
The other problem with security is you send a resource owner, here's the 10,000 data sets that you own, are these the right people to have access to them, and they sign off on it because they don't have enough information.
That's right, yeah.
You know? So this gives them some granularity to see, or this backs that up. So
Right.
They're not.
Yeah, this is not looking at whether you should or shouldn't have access. It's just saying this is something you're doing that's not normal.
Right.
So again, that's an important thing, is that there are other people who may worry about whether you access the correct data sets. And in fact, using something like data content discovery, we could feed the machine learning tool as to what's sensitive and what it ought to care about. But nevertheless, this is really looking at a different viewpoint which says this is not a normal behavior. The idea is to find things that otherwise would be missed in the mix. So, anyone else? Yes, sir.
So you're using machine learning just to establish a norm?
Yes, machine learning establish norm and then differentiate between abnormal.
On the spikes outside of the
Correct, yeah, that's right. So if you've seen the MOI product here on our booths, same concept. They're using alerts and issues and events on the system side. We're going to do the same kind of thing, but around users.
So is your plan to have this running on the Zen platform?
Yes, well, right now the MOI tools run on Z-Linux, and that's probably where this would run as well, for a lot of reasons. One is there's machine learning as a platform at the moment runs on Linux, Z-Linux. The other thing is you probably don't want the MIPS associated with doing some machine learning, so we think you'd prefer to run it on Linux or Z-Linux. So if that's a deal breaker, let me know. But at the moment, that's our plans, is to do something that's the platform much like MOI is sort of where we're thinking. Yes, sir.
Tell me more about how it might integrate with a SIM, because we're looking at different SIM tools right
Yeah.
now. I think we're going with a logarithm, which is a SIM
Yeah,
tool.
yeah,
And we also are looking at data classification tools like
Yep.
Varonis
right.
to help us determine baselines and user analytics.
Sure.
And so
How would it integrate with SIM tools? So the concept that we're thinking about here, and I think I have a use case on here, is that one of the challenges with using a SIM tool in the mainframe is there's so much data. On a security perspective, there are literally millions, if not trillions, of events. I can give you some big numbers, but they're huge. So if you load it up onto a SIM tool, most SIM tools are priced on the terabyte, petabyte basis. So we really don't want to send that to the SIM tool. The idea here is to filter them. So you can, in fact, we have products that can filter those events and only send the important ones from a security perspective. In this case,
SMF records?
well, we're actually going to look at rack route, but SMF is another input to this. So we're going to, the idea here is that the tool itself is looking at the data, running the baselines. When it sees an alert or it sees something, a spike, as you say, we're going to actually send that spike event to the SIM tool and say, here's an event that we think is important. It looks like an insider threat. We'll classify it as a certain class of information. So that event will get sent. What I don't know is whether we'll send baseline information. Now, presumably, the SIM tool will already have baseline for the most part. If you want to send all the security information for every user to the SIM tool, it's certainly capable, and we can provide that for you as well. We're just of the opinion that maybe you don't want to do that. I don't think anybody is sending all their user data to the SIM tool. You might be,
I don't think we have the user base.
Yeah, so far I've heard input that they just don't want to send that much data down. There's just so many transactions, and it's hard to wade through that. So right now, our notion is to send just those events. If you guys have feedback to say, I want more than that, can you send a baseline snapshot or something? That's something we could consider. So
we're doing SMF records only right now.
SMF, yeah. So.
Bare minimum.
Yeah, we don't send SMF, but we send summaries of rack route calls, same kind of thing. So it doesn't really matter. So in the remainder of this, I really just have some use cases here. So one of the questions I have is privileged users we know we're going to do. The question for you guys is, what about a standard user? Do you want to see a standard user, let's say a bank teller, I don't know, a standard user, someone who does not have elevated access? Now, presumably, their access would be limited as what they can do, but oftentimes you do things by role and just assign a whole bunch of stuff to them because who's got time to figure it out, right? So would this be applied just to privileged users or to standard users? Standard, I'm getting a bunch of standard users.
You need to be able to turn that flag on.
So you want to turn that on for all the users, kind of, maybe?
Or by group at least. That way you can
Or by group, okay, a role, a group, okay. All right, so if I started with privileged users and then eventually gave you standard users, is that a good balance? Okay, all right. So again, this privileged user I talked about, we also want to provide alerts for abnormal accesses to sensitive data sets. So we have the ability to tell you, hey, there's some private information in this data set, so we can actually create activity around a data set and see what users are accessing and what normal looks like for access to that data set. If somebody is accessing a whole bunch, we could actually send an alert based on the volume or the number of accesses as opposed to sort of their behavior. So behavior around a data set itself. Does that sound like an interesting use case as well? Okay, yeah, all right, good. Okay, so this one's a lot about downloads. So this in case somebody's doing an FTP or other methodology of downloading. So in this case, someone is downloading a data set and they're doing it outside of the normal location. Let's say, normally they log into the office in New York. Maybe the next Friday they log into the home. And the first thing they do is they start doing a big FTP session. Okay, now that would kind of worry me, right? So we think this might be a use case to discover whether or not we want to differentiate it on just the IP and a location, or we want to do it on all downloads, right? And see if their download behavior is big, whether the download is a really big download, it lasts a long time, etc. We're not really sure. So we have create alerts for large file transfers if they don't normally do them. So maybe they're doing small ones, they're doing portions of a file or updates. Maybe they're pulling down a bit of data for a test solution, and then all of a sudden one day they pull down a huge, massive amount of data. Now it could be that they just typed in something wrong and now they're copying the entire production down to test. Not that that ever happens, right? But that's something. Does that sound? What kind of things do you want to do with respect to downloads, FTP, Connect Direct, whatever it might be? Is there? Yes, sir.
Would I have capability to do automation?
Capability to do automation.
If I found something like that.
You mean to stop it or something like that? Well, I can send you an alert to say, hey, this is unusual activity. So you could, well, I'll give you sort of my point of view as a product manager on that. On the mainframe or any server for that matter, I prefer to give you the rope. If you choose to turn into a noose, that's your perspective. And the reason is that there are transactions on the mainframe that run your business. So I don't want to arbitrarily say, oh, I think this is a bad transaction and stop it, because it could be a good one.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying it stop it, but like you
I could send you an alert, and then I'll send you the alert if you want to then in a tool to say, hey, if you get this kind of alert from this tool, stop it. Stop whatever the activity is. So yeah, you could, because we would have the session ID and all that sort of stuff embedded in this, and you could do it. Whether obviously a timing issue, right? But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Timing could be important.
Timing is usually important in these things, but yeah.
You could do it with a SIM really easily.
Yeah, SIM could do it if you can get it down there and sort it and find it and send it all back. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand how you do your location-based stuff, because like I log into my corporate VPN, and
Yeah.
so then I'm going to have to get that entire network side to
Yeah.
relay the data.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's
Yeah, so far that's been a challenge for us is for the most part, when you have a mainframe, you're using something like comm server, and so we know all the IPs within the mainframe network, but especially if you're using NAT or something or firewalls, it gets really complicated. So yes, in order for to do this, we're going to have to talk to the network outside the mainframe, which is what, by the way, the tool for our distributed side does. And so we're debating as to whether or not we want to do that and pull all that data in, because it's not something that we do within our ESMs today. But I think it's necessary, but what do you think?
Far stretched. There's no way I can make that happen in my organization. Zero chance.
You can't convince the network team to give you access to that data?
We're so far.
Okay, that makes sense. I understand that, yeah.
So again, a SIM can correlate data from the networking team.
It can.
And
Yep.
so if they're feeding VPN
Yep.
and firewall data
Yep.
into the SIM, and you're feeding your mainframe data into the SIM, then
They could do that, yeah, they could do that. We do that with Splunk today, so we send data to Splunk and we use that to do an IP lookup for a location and send that back to our tool. So yes, we could do that with a SIM tool, no doubt about it.
There'll be integration
so-
between here and like MOI, right? Or at least an API hook, so you can do.
We'll probably be using the MOI underlying platform, how they're integrated and how the data is mixed. Right now, MOI has listeners, so their listener would not be listening to our data, more than likely, but we may have integrations if we can find the use case. So if you've got a use case, I'd love to hear it. So yeah, so as you say, we're going to feed enterprise UAB. So one of the other concepts is that when we get some information that we find useful, we would send it to threat analytics. So our PAM tools would see it and they could raise that up, which they also integrate with Splunk and others as well. So the idea is to give you an enterprise view. That might be within a SIM tool, it might be with another tool within our portfolio. We haven't decided yet. It's called Threat Analytics for PAM. So it's over there on the security pedestal, so go look it up. So in the PAM area is closest to this side. So it's using a little bit different technology than our mainframe solution, but it's an interesting product. So, okay, I've got 5 minutes here. Okay, so poll questions here. Sounds like is your business interested in insider threats? Is this something that there are active projects on, or somebody's talking about, you know, over lunch, or you got some? You're doing this in the SIM tools today, presumably, or you're planning to with logarithms, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
And I wouldn't. It's not always about insider threats. It's
No.
Phishing victims.
Yep. Stolen credentials.
Stolen credentials.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You're right. You're right. You got some projects, or just talking about it? Lots of projects. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Good. So are you doing anything today? I mean, so you're saying it could also be stolen credentials. So what have you been doing up to this point?
We have a solution called Proofpoint.
Okay.
It's like an email firewall.
Okay.
And they have targeted hack detection that helps filter through, you know, to get bad actors.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And things like that. The SIM is.
Yeah.
I know we're late to the game, but it's going to be new for us. We finally got the funding we needed to implement something.
I mean, I'm familiar with next generation firewalls like that do these kind of filtering and get triggers on when, you know, people are accessing or calling on URLs they don't normally do. However, very, very few of those that I'm aware of do anything specific for a mainframe.
Right.
It's just gobbledygook to them by and large. But
what you said.
Yeah, it is FCDIC usually.
So what you said that makes a lot of sense is that filtering the data before it gets to the SIM.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
that's the challenge, is paying for all the data.
paying for all the data. Yeah, yeah, it does. I mean, it's also a big load on the SIM. I mean, I have one customer who, you know, fed a whole bunch of data using a competing tool, and it basically crashed their SIM tool, which is not what they really wanted to do. So we've been talking about how they might use another product to filter it. But yeah, it does happen. There's a lot of transactions in the mainframe. Anybody else? How are you solving this today? Anyone? I mean, are you doing anything in this space? Wishing, yeah.
It's after the fact, right?
Yeah, after the fact. So you're doing the forensics?
We're doing the forensics after the fact.
How's that page down working? Yeah. Yeah, it does. Okay, yeah. That's. I said that at the beginning. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's human powered.
Is this tool meant to be real-time monitoring, and will it have like a batch function so that we can just, you know,
Well, that's a good idea.
User see, dump in a ton
Yeah.
of SMF data or however you want to collect
Yeah.
it, and then see, has there been anomalies for the last 12 months?
I mean, this is meant to be real time or as near real time as we can do it, kind of like MOI. I'm staring at the product manager for MOI behind you. It's meant to be near real time, but that's a great point. So typically we're having tools that are logging SMF or logging rack route or where it might be. There could be an option to feed information, particularly in setting baselines. You could actually feed it, historical information. Maybe you got 6 months worth of SMF. Maybe it's possible we could send that to the tool and sort of stream it as if it's happening in real time to develop those baselines.
Yeah, and also maybe
that's a good idea.
We don't want to burn the processing on real time.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So we're going to do it on the Z-Linux, but you don't even do that?
Maybe not, I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to dump my data in, have you analyze it, spend the 2 hours or whatever the processing of the data is.
Sure, okay, that's a great idea, yeah. That's a good, so pre-train, if you will, the machine learning with forensic data.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
If you don't have any historical record, how do you research, how do I as an analyst research, is this normal?
The idea here is that you would just turn this on, feed data, and over the time period it would decide what is normal. Obviously, there could be abnormal behavior that then becomes recognized as normal, no doubt about that. Well, there are some downsides, right?
But it decides what is normal. I call the guy up and he says, I do this once every 3
right,
months.
so then you would go in there and say, that, and correct the algorithm and say, no, this is normal.
No, first I want to check that he's not lying to me.
Oh, not lying, yeah. Okay. Well, you could look at that and say, I don't care what he says, it still looks abnormal to me. Yeah, so. Okay. Are you interested in, the question to you is, I've described a mainframe-only solution with possible integrations to SIM tools, our own tools, and otherwise. How does this sound if I sold you a mainframe solution for solving this problem? Is this do you think having a mainframe solution focused on mainframe activity, or do you just want us to send it to the SIM tool and be done with it? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yes?
But it needs to also go to a SIM.
Correct, okay.
Corporate compliance and
All
whatnot,
right.
They want to know about that.
They want to know about it too.
Internally to our team,
yeah.
We want red flags need to show up long before, because they get tons of data in the
SIM.
Right. They don't even know what our data is.
Right? Yep, I understand.
Red alerts, all right, not ours, see you later.
Yeah.
But,
okay, that's good. What about you? You're doing yours now, so what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess we're a smaller organization, and I've done a lot of research on SIMs. They've got really good user analytics. They've got a lot of things that have already been invented, that are ready to absorb the data. So I think feeding into the SIM and taking advantage of what those products already do is a little bit of not reinventing the wheel.
All right.
But I can understand when you're working on a siloed team and you don't have access to the SIM, that you may need another avenue into that data.
That makes sense. I'd like to find out how it works out. I'm not saying it won't, but I'd love to hear how it works out, because I'd like to know how it performs. Anyone else?
Yeah, there are mainframe specific events that the SIM doesn't know about, the other team doesn't know about, that you would want to have filtered out before it gets to them. Basically, and have a different alert process for that. So I can see it.
I can understand that. And he makes a good point. I mean, that's silo speaking too as well, right? So if you're not siloed, it might be beneficial. So, okay. So thank you for giving me input. I really appreciate that. Stay tuned. We'll see what happens. So thanks very much. I appreciate it.